To help us continue this conversation, I want to invite a couple of folks up here. I want to invite the co-writer and director of the film, Paul Odgren, to join us. Paul, where are you? He's right here. And Jean Eddy, the CEO of American Student Assistance, my dear friend. Paul is a filmmaker based in Central Massachusetts. He's written, directed, and produced a number of award-winning films. And his co-writer, who couldn't be here tonight, is a dear friend of mine, Eunice Chapon. She serves as Director of Impact for the Impact Investment and VC arm of the American Cancer Society. And she's a hoot, as you can tell. Between her and Paul, it had to be fun writing that and putting it together. Jean Eddy is the CEO of ASA. If you don't know about ASA, you should. I'm a bit biased. I chair the board there, but it's asa.org. Jean has more than 25 years of experience creating and leading creative educational organizations. She was COO at RISD, SVP of Students and Enrollment at Brandeis, and in a variety of leadership roles at Northeastern University. ASA is an amazing nonprofit, really helping kids, middle school kids and high school kids, test and try and find their why and make thoughtful choices about education and career. Jean is also an alum of Authors and Innovators. We had her last year when she talked about her book, Crisis Proofing Today's Learners. Paul and Jean, welcome to the conversation. So lots to talk about that, about this film, and I want to get Ethan and Michael's reaction. But Paul, tell us a bit about how this came together, and because we're talking about storytelling, why was this interesting to you?
So I met, all right, thank you. So I met Eunice, who I wrote the film with, because she's involved with the Boston International Film Festival, helps to run it, and I had a film there, and we just got into a conversation about, she's seen so many poor decisions that have been made because she was a finance lawyer and had a long career. She's very knowledgeable. She's also Korean American and just has a lot of personal and professional experience that she was interested in telling stories about, but she didn't have any film experience. She didn't have screenwriting experience. So we just kind of were talking, and she's just like, you wouldn't believe the stuff I've seen at like the SEC and all these things. And so I was just very interested because I was like, oh, here's somebody who I didn't know when I met her that she actually wanted to make films and try to tell these types of stories. But having somebody who's knowledgeable about anything like that and interested in communicating those ideas, I was just, I was like, this is a really cool world. It would take me years to research that. She also has the personal experience of, again, being Korean American, being a woman, and navigating that world that's been traditionally run by white men like me for a long time, and being able to collaborate between the two of us because we both wanted to be authentic with those perspectives as much as we could, but still have fun and still make something that's entertaining and hopefully fun to watch. So yeah, it really just came from that, from meeting.
And it was. And Jean, from ASA's perspective, you see a lot of folks who end up in a professional organization, sometimes intentional, often by accident. Talk a bit about how you saw that. Thinking about these terrific, thoughtful, intelligent young people ending up at a place that might not fit them.
I think so much of what happens to all of us is, we kind of go into this world thinking that, well, my mom did this, my dad did that, or maybe my neighbors did this, and I think Michael writes an awful lot about social capital and about the people who surround you and what that means. I also think there are in many, many, many populations, and I would have to say for women, that you have a tendency to strive past what your parents or the people around you will actually end up doing for the rest of their lives. And the hope that I have and the work that we do at American Student Assistance is by helping young people identify at a really early age those things that absolutely matters to them, like what is their purpose? Larry calls it the why. I would say it's the, what do I love to do? How am I good at it? And how can I use that to be able to look at a myriad of careers that will help me get to a place of success and happiness? And I think watching that young woman, I think she had a lot of the elements right. She just didn't have all of them right. And I think that when she was searching, had she been looking for some of those things that really made her heart sing, she would have come up with a different alternative.
Ethan and Michael, it had to be a lawyer. So talk a bit about your reactions, because you've got, I'm sure, a lot to say. Talk about Get Out, reclaiming alignment, taking a next step. There's a lot in there. So I love your reaction to the film, because what struck me after reading your book and talking to Paul is I said, we've got to do this. It's spot on.
So I'll start, and then you can go to the quests. Paul, I loved the written line, and I'm not going to get it exactly right, so you'll have to correct me. I took this. I wanted to be important. Michael talked a little bit earlier about being versus doing. We take jobs because we want to be the VP of something or other, or we want to be the associate at big name law firm, and we don't appreciate what that means we're going to be asked to do. And then it's a process of figuring out, is that actually the path that's going to lead us where we want to go or not? And she makes a decision at the end, and we can talk about the no versus yes decision, is she going to quit or not? But she took the job, not for the experiences of the job, but the features. And that I think at the tension point of your story is, the way we would see it is, that's what happens to many people for worse and better reasons when they are sold on the attributes and they don't appreciate the experience they're going to have.
Here's where I get to step outside of the book a little bit. First, congrats on the film. I'll be super personal because it hit me. My wife's Korean American, and she lost her father in January to lung cancer. So
Wow.
It hit me, you can hear it, incredibly hard in that way. And I would say it's the other piece to Ethan's point about the experiences and what you'll do, not what you'll be. It connects to a book I wrote, Choosing College. Because what we found there is that large percentages of students are going to college to get into the quote unquote best college.
Right.
They don't have a deeper why underneath. And that translates right into the take the next steppers. And while we wrote the book for people who really have had one job, because of what I do with the rest of my life, with Jean and others, I'm super interested in how do you adapt it to the K-12 and higher ed audiences. And what occurs to me is we focus so much on the being. Oh, I'm going to be a corporate lawyer. Oh, my God, I knew you were going to be big. I knew you were going to be this, right? Instead of the what you do and how it aligns to what gives you energy. It's clear that that's not happening there. And there might be some alignment on capabilities, like how I get to use it, but it's in pursuit of what? And so my guess, at least, is that she's somewhere in between Get Out and Regain Control. Yeah, that's my guess, right? You'd want to interrogate that character more, but like you can see how if you know, even in her mom's reaction, right? She comes around to say, whatever you want, honey, and I will tell you with a Korean American, I'm not sure you always get that reaction. Like, you know, that sort of, well, you're supposed to climb the career ladder and progression because that's what you're supposed to do, that obligation. I hope we help people unlock that earlier, to Jean's point, so they're not even in the dilemma in the first place, but they're doing the work that they want to be doing.
Michael, thank you for that. You did want to hear, at least I did at the end, what happens? Paul, what happens with her next?
We don't know yet.
Okay. All right, maybe there's a series.
Sequel's coming.
It's definitely about presenting that dilemma between, like you said, it's sort of like the idea or the image of what that job represents. And that's what I think you were referencing towards the beginning, is like wanting to be one of those important people who are in charge of these important things, but then finding out what the reality of that actually means, and there's no way to really know that without experience, right? I mean, you go through life and you think you want to do one thing and you don't necessarily know, and that's why you have to get out there and try it, and you just have to get out and do stuff, and then you might be like, well, you know what, this isn't for me, and then you can find another path. And so she's at a point in her life where she's getting an experience with she's obviously very competent at the professional side, but then there's the moral side of what you're doing. And it's like exploring like what's in the best interest of, kind of like her boss says, what's in the best interest of the firm, or what's profitable, or what are we taught to do, what are we brought up to do to pursue these types of jobs, excel in your career, do these things. But then if you start to unpack the moral side of what you're doing, it's something that they don't necessarily teach you in school, or maybe they do, but it's hard to know until you get out there in the world and have experience whether one particular role is a fit for you. So that was just a big part of what we wanted to sort of have a conversation about in the film, and sort of like try to do it in an entertaining way.
And you did. One of the things that I've learned from working with Jean and ASA is to stop asking kids what they want to be and start asking them who they are. And you talk a bit about ikigai, if you will, the Japanese concept of finding your why in the book. Jean, talk a bit about, expand a bit about that as it might apply to this young lawyer as she's thinking about, do I stay, do I go? Ikigai is about, what do you love? What are you good at? What does the world need? And what can you get paid to do?
Mm-hmm, exactly. And I think that there has to be a balance of all of those things. I always tell the story about parents will always look at me and say, okay, you're telling me that I want my son or my daughter to go out and visualize what they are good at and what they love to do. And I will tell you, I can't tell you the amount of times that this happens. A parent will come up to me and say, my son thinks he's going to be the next Steph Curry. He's going to be the next Jason Tatum. And there is no way that I am convinced this young man that this is not going to be the case. And I said, but you have to think about all of the other things that go along with Ikigai, which is, what does the world need? Your son or your daughter, for that matter, who might have exceptional skill as an athlete, could bring so much to the world if they really understood the mechanics of athletics and how that works with physical therapy, occupational therapy, different types of medicine, etc. And I would also say that the odds of you making a living thinking about being an NBA player when you're in middle school, the odds are really low. But I will tell you that if you think about all the ways that you could think about those very characteristics that your son or your daughter loves, that there might be a million paths that they could follow only if someone introduced them.
And they can learn more about that at asa.org.
Yes.
Right. So, Michael and Ethan, if you're that employer, you're that law firm, it didn't strike me that that mentor was offering a whole lot of discernment. So, give advice.
Alcohol.
Alcohol. Well, you're right. You're right. There was some advice there. Ethan and Michael, if you're advising that firm and you're walking in to talk to that management team at the firm, where do you start? What would you tell them?
We can get to the diversity conversation in a moment, which, by the way, is our one failing in this book. We have a lot of diversity in the data set, but not among the co-authors, and that's also reminded me, that is what it is. I was reminded of that as I watched the film. I'll start and give Michael time to think. There was a piece of the beginning and the end of the film that resonated with me, because we didn't talk about specifically what the pushes and pulls are, but you probably noticed, Larry, that one of the things that does not appear on pushes and pulls is money.
Fair enough.
And that's because money, we find, is a tangible reward, and it is fungible. But people don't ultimately do things for money unless they are really in need of the ikigai part of the money. They do it for something else because they're actually using the money for something else. And sometimes it's much easier to actually give an employee what they're looking for in that second step than it is the money itself. The money is less valuable than whatever it is that they're trying to use the money for. And if you look at her, it's interesting because you start and end with money. but the salary she's making is nothing compared to the cancer pill. And if only the he's understood some of that what is important to her is the cancer pill, the livelihood of her parents, which she translates into the rest of the people who are getting hurt by this endeavor, and what she wants to do to make the world better, you'd understand a lot more about her potential pulls, what she dreamed of this job being, and the pushes, the things that might push her away. And a different kind of conversation, a different kind of dialogue, a different kind of story, a different kind of narrative would change her perspective on her prospects so much.
And I think, frankly, would cause the firm then to ask questions. And I'll defer a little bit to the practicing attorney here. But I think, right, like sometimes you, in the firm, you think you're also on the track, right, where you don't see choice. We're doing what our client says. But what I know of professional services from the consulting standpoint is, while the customer's never wrong, clients sometimes need to be led a little bit.
Right. Right.
And there's a distinction there, or at least I make one. And so what's the conversation, and what is, I tend to think that when you get the greater good, things line up a little bit better than you might expect on these things. And so I think it starts with the human side, and it actually translates into the business side as well. And how do you align progress there? And just one quick reflection. I think a lot of times you're right. You can't learn these things except through the School of Hard Knocks. Except that actually what I've learned through Jean's work at ASA, and a major argument in the book, is that we can learn before switching by prototyping ourselves in these experiences. And a big push of Jean's work in middle school and high school, but really middle school, is how do we get students into these experiences where they can start to actually discern what are the things that really, what do I like doing? That's what, so I have a few other people that speak to me. Diane Tavner always says the INGs. What do I like doing? And then the other piece of that, the woman who runs the Tiger Woods Foundation, she said, we can learn about work, we can learn through work, and then we can learn at work. And how do we actually give people these experiences much earlier? So frankly, that, you know, the partner there, but also that the employee, you know, first year lawyer, has a much greater sense of like how to align these things in their lives so that they're doing the right thing all throughout.
Yeah, great observation. I want to take some time to take questions from you folks, and also give you time to meet and meet Ethan and Michael and Paul and Jean as well, but also get some books signed. So we'll take a few questions from the audience if there are some. Yes, right here. Wayne.
So I have a question about assessments, whether it be predictive index or DISC, and it's generally used to determine if an employee is or potential employee or current employee is the right fit. Is there a reverse of it where prospective employees can figure out whether the person they're going to work for is the right fit? Increasingly because you know, AI is determining who's the right fit, but you know, you're trying to figure out, do we have the right grouping of people, which these assessments help. But I was more thinking about it from a reverse. Yeah.
All right, let me just repeat that for the 90 or so people on live stream. So the question's really about assessments. Employers can do assessments, but what about the employees trying to assess whether this is a good fit? Glassdoor isn't exactly illuminating all of the time, and Google's a great search engine, but doesn't always help. So can you speak to that?
So we've tried, with these pushes and pulls, we've tried to create an assessment that won't necessarily assess the employer, but at least it provides the potential employee with a sense for why they're thinking the employer would be a good fit, and then that's a conversation to be had. And so this is going to sound promotional, but at jobmoves.com you can go to, and the assessment is free. And it's literally just a question of all these pushes and pulls that definitely present, definitely not present, probably not present. If you have, ideally you have about 3 to 5 definitelys, and the rest are probablys, and then you'll get some sort of somewhat predictive likelihood of where you might be in terms of your quest, and that helps to determine a little bit about whether or not the destination you're thinking about, or for that matter, whether or not your current role might be a good place for you to do that quest. And once you have that information, we actually suggest in the HBR article that is coming out in the November-December issue.
It's out. I just actually saw it in an airport.
Oh, wow. Well,
There you go.
We talk about HR and other partners within the organization tracking those quests so that the organization can play a role in owning and being accountable for that. That's different than a Strengths Finder or a Hogan or any of these other things that are trying to figure out whether or not the person will fit in the organization. And if you think about, it could be that some organizations are particularly good at regaining alignment, regaining control. You could imagine a situation in which, in the aggregate, you could look at the results if an entire organization took our assessment, and then you could try to match that to the person who's thinking about joining given their quest. That would be a potential use, though we haven't necessarily tested that out. But beyond that, I think it still falls to the individual, because it's awfully hard to assess an organization. Organizations, after all, human-made things that evolve over time. So our people evolve over time, but I think it's more about the person taking the assessment and knowing what they want coming into it.
This is also where we say buy the book.
Yes,
So
fair,
we plug the book.
Fair enough. I will quickly say there are several managers whose stories we tell in the book who start using the assessment with their team so that they understand, why did you come here, and can we align right to the pushes and pulls that have led you here, and make sure you're continuing those growth opportunities. Then every performance review is actually looking back at those pushes and pulls. The other piece of it is, as you prototype your different jobs for what you could do, you can actually then match them to what drives your energy, what are the no-goes, like ethically this is not going to work for me, and how your capabilities are being used, and literally actually then rank those prototypes. And we have a tool to do that up on jobmoves.com as well, that I think can help you understand, these are the trade-offs if I go here, but this is what I get out of it, and these are the trade-offs if I go here, but this is what I get out of it, and literally actually have a better fit score for you to help try to ascertain that.
Yeah,
So
it's a terrific website, JobMoves.
jobmoves.com. Yeah.
Other questions? Yes, Bobby, right here.
I have been trying to help a young person in my life get a new job. They got laid off, and there's a certain amount of scoffing at my assistance in terms of things like networking and getting your foot in the door and all those things that, oh gosh, my 40 years of experience tell me are the right way to go about getting a job. But to be fair, yes, it has been 25 years since I last looked for a job. Who's right?
So the question for folks on live stream is about assisting a young job seeker who might have different ideas than the traditional ones about networking and going about a job search in the way that has been done for a long time.
I'll give you the short answer, which is you are right. And there's something called, I don't know if you're the parent of this young person. Yes. Okay. There's another concept from other work that we do that we call the parental discount, which is to say that the parent, and we all, have this, right? At some point, your advice is discounted
It's
just
true.
because you are the parent.
Right.
And so you've got to find that trusted other source. Exactly, there you go. And yet they discount it. And so finding that other source that can say the same message, it's the same reason why we hire consultants occasionally. You can't be a prophet in your own land. And so that may be what's going on a little bit there.
right,
Well,
well-
make me smarter.
So I'll offer you maybe a story of comfort. So I gave a presentation at an HBS reunion recently, and I had a gentleman come up to me afterwards and say he'd spent decades in executive search, and he has a daughter who's 34, and she's looking for a job. And when he suggested he would help her, she said, "Well, what do you know about this?"
Sounds about right. That sounds about right.
But so I will say, I'm told. So he asked me for an early copy of the book. I don't have many of those, but I gave him an early copy, and I'm told that the process brought them together. So the advice doesn't work, but sometimes allowing you to be the person in the process, read the book together, or do whatever process you're going to follow together. If it's someone else's process, and you're part of it. That seems to help. And there is a fairness in saying things have changed. So I don't know that we would necessarily.
Fair.
I don't like to criticize other pieces of material that are out there that are really quite evergreen in nature, but there is a degree to which our book wouldn't be as valuable if What Color Your Parachute weren't data from a different generation and a process from a different generation. So some things have changed. What McKinsey would have told you in the War for Talent in 1998 was this prescription for making people successful at work is not what people in 2022 want after the pandemic. There is something new out there, and it is affecting the job market, and it is affecting the way people find work.
And I would say this, we got a full day for them tomorrow, starting with Is Your Work Worth It? Find Your Treasure. So if they can tune in tomorrow, we'll give them more. Another question, Michael.
Thanks. Somebody mentioned StrengthsFinder, and it got me thinking about the first question of the 12 questions of Gallup's engagement survey is, I know what's expected of me at work. And there are lots of companies that have highly engaged workforces, and I'm trying to square that with the comments about a half an hour ago about which I agree with, the murky HR speak job description of, all kinds of fancy words, but not really representing what's going to be done. How do you think about that?
I'll let you frame the question and the answer.
Yeah, so, okay, I'll do my best from the question first. So the question was, if you look at Gallup and the survey they do of the American workforce every year, the first question is around, do you understand what you're supposed to, the expectations of you at work? And the answer is actually higher in certain workforces than you might expect, right? Writ large compared to what we were saying about 30 minutes ago with regards to job descriptions not actually accurately representing, right? So I have two thoughts on that, and then Ethan, you can jump in with anything else. The first one is, what's interesting also, though, is that the Gallup survey suggests that about 2/3 of American workers are completely disengaged at the moment at work. And what I think what we're saying is it's not that you won't figure out what the expectations are as you are in the job over time, but how can we make those expectations much more transparent on the front end? So you make a better choice, so you will be engaged, and it's a place you want to rehire each and every day, compared to the film where we just saw where she ain't rehiring that place.
So Gallup is interesting, right? The most predictive question is the best friend question. The affiliation within. And so if you look at those questions, including that one, and you want to tell the story of, well, that's overstating things, and I never want to overstate things. So I'm glad you're asking this question. I'm very glad you're asking it. In part, I think that's a lot of managers working really, really hard to ensure that despite the systems around them, sadly in spite of the systems around them, they're making that engagement happen. And so sometimes we've been talking about the book and we have HR people say, well, but managers will never spend the time to do this work that they need to do with this book. And our answer is actually, no, we think they're already spending more time than they need to spend.
Right.
And this will allow them and others to do it more effectively and more easily with your help. And so to me, that's a story of promise and hope and potential, not a story of otherwise. But there are lots of people out there who don't necessarily feel that way, and this is a way to spread that and make sure that managers can do it more effectively.
I'll start with, I'm going to go to my last question before we get to some book signing. And I'm going to start over with Jean and ask a traditional authors and innovators question. What author, what innovator are you looking at, thinking about these days, whether in your work or just for fun?
Oh my. There are so many right now in our space, and I wish you had previewed this with me, because let me tell you that, and I am not throwing big bouquets when I don't need to throw them, because he has enough already. But I would have to say the person who brought me down the road of looking at what we needed to do to change how kids in this country actually end up with a successful career was Michael Horn. I read a a book of his called Dysfunction,
Was it Disrupting Class?
Disrupting Class. I say dysfunction because in many respects it is, but disrupting education and how, and I really read it with the idea that he was talking about what education should be and paralleling it to what it isn't today and what we need to do to change that. And so when I came into this meeting tonight, and I met Michael and his co-author, and he had a book that he was about ready to hand me, and he said this, I have this for you, and I said, well, I already read it. I would have to say that that I do follow what Michael has to say religiously. I would also say that I also look for research out of Harvard, particularly out of Joe Fuller's shop.
Okay, terrific. Paul, author, or innovator, and what are you working on these days?
So always working on films, and I do a lot of freelance production, post-production, various kinds, so lots of projects. I got a fantasy horror short film working on, and do commercials, videos for nonprofits, businesses, all kinds of things like that.
And the website?
It's just
Folks want to get a hold of you?
It's my name, pauladgren.com, which I can always give to you if you want to know how to spell that. But yeah, authors and innovators. I'm watching some shows right now for pure entertainment, and like rom-coms, horror, things like that. But I'm also reading. I think it's been a while since I went back and read about people. I think we can learn a lot from the past, and I'm actually reading the autobiography of Gandhi right now, because I just thought before
And doing a horror film.
Yes.
Okay. All right. We're gonna have to talk about this.
Yeah. So I just thought, I figured I'd hear what he has to say about it first before, just because I don't know. I know he did all these amazing things, but so I think, it's important to stay informed about the current day and what's happening, but I think we can learn a lot from history as well. So yeah, that's kind of what it's just what I happen to be doing at the moment. It's not really a plan.
What's next for Shape of Money?
So we're going to have some more screenings. We're setting up a few. We're also submitting to film festivals. So with any luck, we'll be screening at some more festivals. We premiered at one in Arlington in August. And Eunice and I have been talking about other plans that we have for the film because we think it can be an educational tool, specifically in a lot of, she was already talking about an organization using it as a tool for basically a board of Asian lawyers, finance law and law, just using it as a training tool, using it to try to deliver the message. And, she has experienced a lot of, she had somebody, a white guy on the other end of a phone call only a few years ago, I think it was post George Floyd, who was complaining about diversity hiring and how he couldn't, basically he had to conform to these, standards. So it's funny because you think some of that is exaggerated in the film, but it really is. There's this attitude out there that's very against it. So a lot of what she talks about is educating people about that and wanting more diversity in positions of power, not just race and demographics, but also diversity of thought, creative solutions to problems, and not just people who maybe come from a class where they were able to get this career and they're insulated from the decisions that they make. So that was also part of what the film was about, and that's something that I am really interested in as well. So
Terrific. I also want to acknowledge the managing partner in the film is also with us tonight, the actor.
Yes,
So
I wanted to give a
thank
shout
you.
out. So JT Turner. So he plays. Yes, he's the one who loved K-pop. He had one of the best lines in the film, and he's here.
Terrific. Great realistic presentation. Ethan, Michael, an author, innovator. What are you reading? What are you watching? What are you thinking about?
So you gave me warning about this. Sorry, Gene. So what I'm watching at the moment, actually, ironically, is a Korean drama series, Jewel in the Palace, about the story of Dae Jang-gum, who becomes the first woman, ultimately chief medical officer in the Korean around 1400 or so. So it's actually very interestingly very good series. I'm not supposed to know the ending, but I was at the Museum of Fine Arts exhibit on the Koreans, and part of it was featured there, and so I happened to see it. But my kids don't know yet. So then, and what I'm reading, I've been personally trying to, like my resolution, New Year's resolution, was to get better at not interrupting and listening and asking better questions. So I just finished Hal Gregerson's book, The Question is the Answer.
Okay. I don't have that on my list. I'll have to.
No, not mine. Ours. So as I mentioned, or as mentioned, I'm an HBS professor. I'm in the middle of a teaching semester, so I'm reading a lot of cases. But one of them, one of my proudest blurbs on the back is from Gayle King, who is now the chair of the Executive Leadership Council. So Gayle grew up in segregated South. She joined Nationwide Insurance as an adjuster in Florida. And some 30 plus years later, I met her when she was receiving an award as the chief administrative officer of that organization, of Nationwide, for having been one of the best HR leaders in the world. And when I heard her speak, just for about 5 minutes, I did something I'd never done before, which was as soon as I had a chance, because she was seated I was at this table, she was at the table behind me, so she was right behind me. I stood up, I handed her my business card and said, if you let me write a case about you, I'd love to.
Wow.
And she led an engagement initiative at Nationwide around Gallup, although not using Gallup, but not the way Gallup would tell you to do it necessarily. That was highly transformational for that organization. So that's what we'll be talking about next week. But she'll also be here as a chair of a board, of a top board in the country, with the CEO, who she helped to replace through the succession process that she ran. And so I don't know if she's in that stat of how many minority women versus Daves, but I would trust her, and I follow her, and she has a book on inclusion that I think is marvelous. I've read it. I'm not reading it, although I'm rereading the case and rereading it, so I'm ready for that conversation next week. But that's who I'm following at the moment.
Oh, that's terrific. The book is Job Moves, 9 Steps for Making Progress in Your Career. I want to thank Ethan and Michael, Paul and Jean, and all of you